Happy New Year's, everybody. We've come to the end of 2021. If you have been reading the Bible with us, following our Bible reading plan here at First Baptist, today we wrap up this year's reading plan. And if you started with us in January, you will have read and written in your journal and reflected on, meditated on, and prayed about 260 chapters in the Bible. 260 chapters in the Bible. Praise God. I'm so happy that you've been on this journey with us. Monday, we began our new reading plan for 2022. You can find it on our website. There are also printed copies available at the church. We will start with the book of Romans. So in preparation for Monday, go ahead and read Romans chapter 1. Now, most days, I like to share with you what God spoke to my heart, speak devotionally from these chapters. Today, instead, I want to do some teaching, clear up some confusion that may exist, and illustrate why it is important for us to read the Bible slowly and carefully, and also be careful not to make assumptions when we're reading. Because sometimes we do that, and because of it, we don't really see what it says. For instance, today we're going to be reading about the resurrection in Matthew 28. And when the two Marys, because that's what Matthew 28 mentions, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, not his mother but another one, come to the empty tomb. Here's two questions. When they see the angel, is the angel sitting on the stone that was rolled away from the tomb, or is the angel inside the tomb? Second question, how many angels? Is there one angel or two angels? So now let's read the first 7 verses and learn some stuff. Chapter 28, verse 1. Now after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, so in their culture that would be early Sunday morning while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the grave. And behold, a severe earthquake had occurred, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat upon it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing as white as snow. The guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. For I know that you are looking for Jesus who has been crucified. He is not here, for he has risen just as he said. Come, see the place where he was lying. Go quickly, tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you." And then they leave the tomb and report to the disciples what they had seen. Now, I want you to notice some things. A quick reading would lead us to think the angel still sitting on the stone and that there was one angel, right? But when you read the other Gospels, you get a different picture. So what's going on? Notice in verse 2 that the earthquake occurred before the women got there. It's in past tense. A severe earthquake had occurred. And then parenthetically, he describes that when that earthquake occurred, an angel came down, rolled the stone away, sat on it, and that's when the soldiers became afraid, passed out. And then we learned later they actually got up eventually and left. And the women had not arrived when all of this is happening. Now, when you get to verse 5, the story jumps ahead to the women showing up. And all we know about the women from Matthew 28 is that there are two of them, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. And when you read it fast, you just assume the angel still sitting on the stone. And you could just as likely assume that the soldiers were still there. Those are our assumptions. And we assume because that angel, and he spoke to them, that there's just one angel. The problem is that when you read Mark, Luke, and John, there are other details given that Matthew does not give, and the picture changes somewhat. For instance, Mark, in his gospel, adds that Salome was also with them. So now we know there were 3 women, not just Mary and Mary, but also Salome. Mark tells us that when they arrived, they saw the stone already rolled away. And Mark mentions that they went inside the tomb, and that is when they saw the angel. That is when the angel spoke to them. And the angel in Mark is called a young man who was wearing a white robe. Now, Matthew said it was dazzling and white like snow. Mark just mentions it was white. But the angel speaking to them inside the tomb. So we learn from Mark, no, the angel was not sitting on the stone when the women showed up. He sat on the stone after he rolled it away, and the soldiers passed out. But when the women showed up, on the outside, all they saw was the stone rolled away, meaning the soldiers had already left, and the angel was not on the stone, but now he's inside the tomb. Luke describes it very similarly to how Mark does, but adds that inside the tomb, rather than one angel, there were actually 2 angels, and that they were dazzling. And so while one angel spoke to the women, and Matthew and Mark simply tell us about the one angel that spoke to them, Luke adds that there was actually another angel present, even though he wasn't speaking, he was there. When you read the story in John, you get even more details. John only mentions Mary Magdalene. He doesn't mention Salome. He doesn't mention the other Mary, just Mary Magdalene. And that when she showed up, the stone was rolled away. And then he jumps ahead to Mary running away from the tomb to where the disciples had gathered in a house and told Peter and the others that the stone was rolled away and that somebody maybe had stolen the body. And Peter and John, 2 of the disciples, get up, run to the tomb. Well, we learn from John that Mary, and because of that, we know the other Mary and Salome were there, and maybe some other women even, followed John and Peter as they all ran back toward the tomb. And when they get there, they see it just like the women had described, the stone rolled away. That's all they see right now. John and Peter go inside the tomb, and they don't see any angels. All they see are the clothing, the cloths that Jesus' body had been wrapped in when he was buried, neatly folded and laying there, and that's all they see. There's no angels, no conversation. And we're told that John believed at that moment that Jesus had been raised from the dead, but Peter not so much. Peter wasn't sure. And so with all these details, let me ask you a question. Is the Bible in these accounts contradicting itself? What's going on here? Well, we're going to get into the details a little bit more in just a moment. But what you have are 4 authors describing the resurrection. And each of them are telling different parts of the story. We make the mistake when we read these accounts of thinking that they're trying to give us a scientific, documented, moment-by-moment, step-by-step account of every detail of every conversation, of everything that happened. And that's not what they're doing. They're each telling the story and choosing to tell the parts of the story that was important to them in telling the story. Now, let's say 5 of us see something happen, and we're all going to tell the story, and we're going to tell the same story. We're not going to tell it the same way because I'm going to include some details, and you may include some other details I didn't. And I may include some details you did not. Well, my details are accurate and yours are, but we don't all tell the story using the exact same words or every detail. In fact, in my own life, and I bet I guarantee you do this too. There are stories you tell over and over to people, right? And I guarantee every time you tell that story, sometimes you include this detail and other times you leave out that detail, right? Because we don't tell the stories verbatim with every detail. Sometimes we just tell certain parts. Sometimes we tell a shorter version of the story with fewer details. Other times we tell a longer version of the story with more details. Are you contradicting yourself? No. You're just not including every single detail, like writing a scientific journal when you tell the story. That's what's going on here. They're not contradicting. They're just telling the story. And some of them are including this part of the story. Others are including that part of the story. How do we get the whole story? We kind of have to weave them together. So there's nothing contradictory here. They're just telling the story. And sometimes they run the details together, or they leave out this and there's a gap in there. And it can seem like this went with that, but actually there was other things in between, but they don't fill us in. It's just normal. So what's really going on? Well, let me piece it together for you. Early that morning, that Sunday morning while it was still dark, there was an earthquake. An angel came down and rolled the stone away and sat on it. The soldiers were afraid and passed out. Eventually they woke up and they ran away in fear. The women arrive after this. How many women? We don't know. We know for a fact 3, Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, and Salome, but there may have been others. We don't know, but at least 3. And when they arrive, they see the stone rolled away, and that scares them. They think someone has stolen Jesus' body. That's all they see at this moment. They don't see angels. They don't go in the tomb. They just see the stone rolled away, and they turn around, and they run to where the disciples are gathered in that upper room. And they tell them that the stone's been rolled away. Peter and John get up and run to the tomb, and the women follow them. And when Peter and John arrive at the tomb, they go inside, but they don't see an angel, don't speak with an angel. All they see are those clothes that Jesus was buried in, folded and lying there. No angels. They walk out of the tomb, and as they do, John believes Jesus has been raised from the dead, but Peter's not there yet. They leave the tomb and go back to where the disciples were still gathered in that room. Now, the women are still there. And they now enter the tomb. And when the women go inside the tomb, they see the 2 angels, and one of those angels speaks with them and tells them that Jesus has been raised from the dead. We also learn from John's gospel that at some point inside the tomb, Mary Magdalene sees Jesus. Now, were the other women still in the tomb? We don't know. Maybe they had gone out of the tomb, and Mary lagged and was the last one still inside the tomb. And that's when she, thinks Jesus is the gardener and hugs him, and he tells her to stop, don't touch me. And he has a conversation with her. So Jesus has that conversation with Mary Magdalene inside the tomb. And she realizes he's raised from the dead. So she leaves the tomb, and then she and these other women all run back to where the disciples are gathered still in that upper room, because, listen, at this moment, all the disciples know is that the tomb is empty. The stone's been rolled away. The tomb is empty. That's all Peter and John saw. That's all they can report back to the disciples. That's all the women, when they first arrived at the tomb early that morning, saw and had reported to them. John believes, but he doesn't have any evidence other than the folded clothes. Now the women run back a second time to where the disciples are gathered and say, we've seen the resurrected Lord. Now all of a sudden, it's not just the tomb is empty and the stones rolled away. We've actually seen the resurrected Jesus. And the disciples struggle to believe. Peter gets up and goes to the tomb a second time. He goes inside, and this time he doesn't see anything more than he saw the first time. God does not allow him to see an angel, does not allow him to see Jesus. He just sees those folded clothes. That evening, the disciples and other followers of Jesus are gathered in that upper room, and Jesus suddenly appears to them. And all 11 disciples except Thomas are in that room. And there's other followers in that room. And so Jesus appears to them that evening. earlier that afternoon, okay, so after the events of that Sunday morning and Jesus appearing to them in that room that evening, earlier that afternoon, Jesus had appeared to the two disciples, two followers, walking on the road to Emmaus and revealed himself to them. Those disciples on the road to Emmaus turn around and run back to Jerusalem and are actually in that room with the disciples and the followers of Jesus when Jesus appears to them. They are telling everybody there what they had experienced on the road to Emmaus. They had seen the resurrected Jesus, and that's when Jesus actually appears in the room that night. There's also some indication in John's Gospel and in 1 Corinthians 15:5 that Jesus had sometime Sunday, we don't know when, privately appeared to Peter. We're not told anything about it. It's just alluded to that there was a private appearance of Jesus to Peter sometime that day. Now, why did I go into all that detail? And this devotion is so much longer than what we normally do. It's because I want you to understand how to read God's Word. Read it slowly and read it carefully. And understand that this is not a reporter or a scientist giving you every exact detail, but each author is just telling parts of the story to make the point they're making as they write their gospel. And you put all of it together, you get the full picture. So there aren't contradictions. It all ties together if you read it carefully. I also want you to understand that when critics say, there are contradictions here. No. Understand what's going on. Also understand there's a difference between reading the Bible devotionally and doing real Bible study. We need both. A Bible study that doesn't, if all you do is study the Bible, but you don't make room for encountering Jesus by engaging in His Word and having that devotional time, if all you do is deep Bible study, you're just trying to learn facts, you can get a full head and an empty heart. If all you do is read the Bible devotionally, you can be emotionally on fire for Jesus, but your theology can be messed up, and you can actually hurt your faith because you end up believing some things that are stupid, and when things don't go the way your theology says they're supposed to go, it ruins your faith. And it's all because you've only read the Bible devotionally, but you've never done any real Bible study. As disciples, we need both. We need both. So I thank you for being part of our Bible reading plan here at First Baptist, for watching these devotions, and for knowing that most days, I'm going to share with you devotionally, but I'm going to do a little teaching. I won't go as long as I have today, but I just thought this would be a good exercise to help you understand how to read the Bible. And the good news, Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive, and I pray that in 2022, you encounter Him in ways that change you and you look more like Him as you become a bold witness for Jesus this next year. God bless you, and I'll see you Monday.